Most people believe defeating a narcissist means winning an argument or walking away first. But the actual moment you dismantle their hold over you announces itself through a quiet you never expected. Absolute, complete silence. Think about the silence I'm talking about, because this isn't the cold shoulder they've used on you before, the strategic withdrawal to make you chase them, the punishing silence that leaves you questioning what you did wrong, or the quiet that follows them jumping to a new target. No, this is the hush of a predator realizing the hunt is over. When a narcissist hasn't been truly defeated, they never stop reacting. You've seen it before. When you tried to leave, they'd come back with promises wrapped in tearful apologies. When you set a boundary, they'd explode in rage to intimidate you back into submission. When you started telling your story, they'd launch a smear campaign to discredit you. Why do they do all of that? Because your emotional response, any emotional response, is their oxygen. But when you've become truly unreachable, not just ignoring them, but genuinely sovereign over your own reactions, their behavior shifts at its foundation. The pursuit stops, the provocations end, the attempts to get a rise out of you simply vanish. This silence is the narcissist's most honest confession. They've accepted that you are no longer a source they can tap into. What you need to understand is that this absence of contact is disorienting for someone who's been conditioned to expect constant drama. You find yourself waiting for the attack that never comes, bracing for the manipulative text you've learned to anticipate. But when that shoe never drops, it reveals something crucial. The narcissist only pursues when they believe pursuit will work. Their strategies, the charm, the anger, the pity, are tactics they employ like tools, and tools are only useful if you engage with them. If you have built a wall they can't scale, a door they can't unlock, a fortress of indifference they can't penetrate, they stop trying. Not because they respect you, but because your non-responsiveness damages their ego more than their silence protects it. When the narcissist goes silent, it's not respect, it's surrender. Now here's where things get interesting. When you've removed yourself so completely that you're no longer available to stabilize them, the narcissist doesn't just get quiet, they start to crumble in ways they can't hide. I'm not talking about you feeling satisfaction at their suffering. I'm talking about the psychological reality of a system losing its regulator. When you served as a primary source of stability, the one who absorbed their chaos, managed their moods, and provided the structure they couldn't generate internally, your absence leaves a void, and that void begins to collapse inward. You'll hear about it eventually, often through people who once believed the narcissist's version of events. Professionally, the person who always seemed so untouchable starts missing deadlines, blowing up at the wrong people, or making decisions that seem irrational. Their polished reputation develops cracks that can't be filled with charm anymore. In their relationships, you'll see a frantic cycle. They'll move from one person to another with a desperation that's visible even to outsiders. This happens because you weren't just a partner or a friend. Did you know that? You were performing an immense amount of invisible labor, holding up a psychological architecture that was never stable to begin with. When you walk away completely, that architecture doesn't just stand there empty, it starts to fall. The new people in their life either lack the depth to provide the same regulation, or they're healthy enough to leave before becoming enmeshed. So the narcissist exists in a state of constant internal dysregulation, and the performance of having it together requires energy they no longer have. So the mask slips, the chaos spills over, and the reality beneath becomes visible to everyone around them. Your departure wasn't just an ending, it was the removal of a load-bearing wall. Here's a sign that many people don't recognize as victory at first. The narcissist physically leaves, not just the relationship, but the entire environment. They move cities, they abandon careers, they ghost friends they've known for decades. They'll burn the entire map of their life and relocate to a place where no one knows what happened. This is different from their typical pattern of discarding a person while keeping their territory. Usually, they want you to see them moving on. They want you to know they've replaced you. But when they've been truly defeated, staying in that environment becomes impossible for them. Why? Because too many people know the truth. If the mask has slipped publicly, if their lies were documented, if their manipulations became visible to the inner circle, if people started comparing notes, they cannot rebuild their image in that space. Their identity is the performance. When that performance is irreparably damaged in a specific environment, the narcissist experiences something close to psychological suffocation, so they flee. And here's what you should know about that flight. It's not strategic. They're not moving on to bigger and better things. They're leaving behind careers, connections, and often significant financial investments because the alternative, existing in a space where they've been seen for who they really are, is unbearable. They'll start over in a new place with nothing and construct an entirely new narrative about why they had to start fresh. This is the narcissist admitting, without using the words, that their entire identity was a house of cards, and you were the wind that knocked it down. But perhaps one of the most revealing signs of defeat is something that arrives in your inbox, often from the last people you'd expect. Those who used to defend them, their flying monkeys, their enablers, they start reaching out. But the tone is completely different now. Before, these messages were designed to shame you, guilt you, or gaslight you about your own experience. Now the tone is something else, genuine concern. You'll get texts saying, "I'm really worried about them, they're not themselves," or "I'm starting to see things I didn't see before." This shift is evidence that the mask isn't just slipping, it's shattered. These people who once dismissed your concerns are now witnessing behavior that frightens them. Do you see the validation in that? The instability, the erratic choices, the emotional breakdowns, it's become too visible for them to ignore. They're reaching out not necessarily to support you, but to make sense of the chaos they're seeing for the first time. This doesn't mean you need to respond. You don't owe these people an explanation, a rescue mission, or a return to the situation that was destroying you. But let their outreach serve as confirmation. The collapse you knew was coming is real, and it's now impossible to hide. Now, in the most rare and psychologically fascinating cases, something unexpected happens. The narcissist develops a new public narrative that sounds almost honest. They start talking about how they lost themselves. They post about working on their trauma. They admit to hurting someone who didn't deserve it. I want to be very clear what this is and what it isn't. This is not genuine transformation. The narcissist hasn't suddenly developed self-awareness and embarked on authentic healing. This is a new form of defense. When complete denial becomes impossible because too many people witness the truth, they adapt. They admit partial fault, but frame it in a way that still serves their needs. They gain sympathy for their struggle. They get admiration for their bravery in admitting fault. They control the narrative by being the one to tell it. And they often use this "I'm working on myself" story to attract new supply who find this vulnerable, growth-oriented version compelling. But here's what this shift truly reveals. You disrupted their psychological functioning so thoroughly that they had to abandon their primary defenses. Their old story, "I did nothing wrong, you were the problem," simply wouldn't hold up anymore. Even if their new narrative is another form of manipulation, the fact that they had to change it at all is evidence of a defeat so complete that they couldn't maintain the original fiction. When the narcissist starts admitting fault, don't mistake performance for transformation. And that brings us to the final sign, the most reliable sign, the one that isn't about their behavior at all, but about what's happening inside of you. When you have truly defeated a narcissist, you don't feel satisfaction, vindication, or even anger anymore. You feel nothing. Now, this isn't the suppression of feelings. This isn't the careful avoidance of thinking about them because it still hurts. This is genuine indifference. It's the complete neutrality you feel towards someone who simply isn't relevant to your life anymore.
How do you know the difference? If you're still checking their social media, hoping to see them struggling, you're still invested. If the idea of running into them makes your heart race, you haven't fully metabolized the experience. But when you've truly healed, you might hear through a mutual friend that they're suffering, and you feel nothing. No satisfaction, no serves them right, just nothing. Because their success has no connection to your worth. Their suffering doesn't validate your experience. They have simply become psychologically irrelevant. And this is the truest form of defeat you can ever inflict on a narcissist. They no longer exist as a significant figure in your emotional landscape. The narcissist's power over you was always dependent on your investment. It was love, fear, hope for change, desire for acknowledgement. Any of it gave them a kind of